Hi everyone! 3 guesses as to what this week's theme of the YouTube video is about. It's a quote. I'll read it out to you. Nothing happens until the pain of remaining the same outweighs the pain of change. It's a quote I've always found quite pessimistic quote actually, even though it's very true. I'm going to put it down. I had when I lost my 7.5 stone, I'd reached a point where I was just sick of how I was, and so the pain of staying the same and potentially getting worse outweighed the pain of doing a diet, and so I did it. But it's because I've always thought of it as quite a negative quote. It's often got me thinking, is it possible to actually get yourself into a state where you're more ready to change, where you're more willing to do the changes that need to be done? And I've been reading a book this week. It's absolutely fascinating, by a guy called Shawn Achor, and it's called Before Happiness. And in it, he lists some skills that you need to do to create a situation in your life where you're ready to reach a goal, or where you can reach a goal. So the very word creation to me implies that you can then create a situation where you can be more ready to achieve something, rather than just waiting for that point in this quote, rather than just waiting for that point where you just reach rock bottom, which certainly happens with a lot of people. You don't have to. You can actually create a situation where you can move yourself forwards. And so for those of us who are either struggling a little bit with losing weight, or don't want to start back on plan, they're resistant to that, or are struggling with maintenance a bit, this is something that I found when I was reading this book was really, really positive. And so I want to share some of those skills that he lists in the book with you. Now, it's particularly resonated with me this weekend because, and I'm going to use my hubby as an example. My hubby is meant to be back on step 2, back on plan, in order to lose some of the holiday weight, and boy is he struggling. I've been posting pictures on my client WhatsApp and Facebook pages with him with a lemon bar in one hand and a bacon butty in the other, and you can guess which one he chose. And so you could argue that his pain of staying the same isn't bad enough for him to actually change. And there is a truth to that. He has lost a bit, and so his tummy's gone down a little bit and he's feeling a lot better, and so definitely that's true for him. But is there a way for him to actually change the way he views things so that he can actually get to where he wants to go? Because he's got probably about another 3/4 of a stone to go until he gets to the BMI that he wants to be at. And that's another point. At the moment, he has now come out of the overweight BMI category, which he was in when he started, and he's now in a healthy BMI. So again, going back to this, he can now say to himself, well, I'm a healthy BMI now, so the pain of hearing that he was in the overweight category is gone, and so he's not driven so much to actually do this. So can he do anything about that? Well, Shawn Achor would argue he can. He has got several skills, and as I was reading the book, I was thinking that without even realizing I was doing it, I did all of those. I applied all of those when I lost my 7.5 stone. Yes, I started off feeling this, going back to that again, I certainly started off feeling so awful that I couldn't bear to stay the same. But obviously, as time goes by and I started to lose my weight, I started to feel better and better and better. And I talk a lot with clients about those the negative feelings that you have when you first start on a diet driving you. They will only work for a little while, and they're very powerful negative emotions to drive you, but they only work for a little while and then they start to wane. And so because you start to feel better about yourself as you're stepping forwards and achieving, moving forwards towards achieving where you want to go, or rather you're getting away from those negative things that have been driving you. Now, Shawn Achor has several skills that he mentions. One of them is something that he calls choosing your valuable reality. And basically what I read that as meaning was that there are many ways to view your world, and choose the way that will most help you. So an example of this is that if you can imagine a mum and daughter, and the daughter is studying for exams and they're both pottering around in the kitchen, and the daughter's really focused and on what she's doing with her studying, and mum tiptoes out and then decides she wants a cup of tea. So she tiptoes back in again, very quietly makes herself a cup of tea and tiptoes out. And she's thinking, her reality is, I don't want to disturb my daughter because she's in the throes of studying. The daughter's reality could be, blimey neck, Mum made herself a cup of tea and couldn't be bothered to make one for me. That's not fair. I've been struggling away here doing my revising, and God, she's so taken with what she's doing at the moment, and oh, that's not fair. And if she then hears Mum going out to do a bit of shopping to give the daughter even more space, Mum's reality, daughter might think, geez, and she's gone shopping and she didn't even ask me if I wanted anything, and actually I needed to do a bit of shopping too, and I could have really valued a bit of a lift. Do you see where I'm coming at with realities? It's possible to change the way you look at something, because there are many different ways of looking at a situation. So what I did with my weight loss was, rather than thinking, poor me, it's not fair that I could, sorry, there's a fly flying around in here, one of those little gnats. Rather than thinking it's not fair that I can't eat that, whatever it was, and maybe I'd cooked, I don't know, tuna pasta bake for the children and I really want it and I can't have it. Rather than thinking that, what I started to think instead was, I would flip it on its head. Yes, of course, there was a part of me that was thinking that, but as soon as I caught myself thinking that way, I'd flip it on its head and say to myself, aren't you lucky that you found something that will help you to lose the weight? And so I, instead of thinking poor me and it's not fair, I flipped that reality and thought to myself, I'm so lucky that I can actually do something about this. So that's an example of, if you're struggling a little bit, have a look at what you're saying to yourself. What picture are you painting with regards to your weight loss and your diet, and how can you change that? The second skill is mapping your success route. So this is basically setting yourself some goals, including incremental ones. And again, I did this without even realizing I was doing it. So for every stone that I lost, in fact, every time I lost every week, I would go out and buy myself some bulbs from the local garden centre as my reward. And then for every stone that I lost, I bought something towards our chicken run. And when I got to goal, the family got together and we made the chicken run, and we went and got the chickens and we released them into the chicken run. So I had all these different goals that I set myself, and that leads on to the next skill that he recommends doing, which is have a clear idea of where you're heading. So paint the target. I love that description, paint the target, which to me means that you have to really have a clear idea of where you're heading, make it really colourful and real. So for me, I had all sorts of things like getting my ring back on again. So I would picture myself slim, size 10 clothes, wearing my engagement ring again that I hadn't worn for 8 years. I was in white size 10 skinny jeans. I had a lot of emotion wrapped up in the image, and I thought this image again and again and again. And I would write it down, and I had a mood board, and that I put pictures up, and I found a few pictures of me when I was slim, and I had loads and loads of emotion in it, loads of things like what my hubby might say to me, what I would say to myself, what my friends would say when they saw me, and I had a really strong visual idea. So when I was tempted by the tuna pasta bake, I'd pull up that image and I had it written down somewhere, which goes back to the success route, mapping your success route out. When you've got a very clear idea of where you're heading with those milestones, if you like, it's easy to imagine yourself at that next step. And then another skill that he suggests is to deal with the negative external and internal noise that can take you away from that target. So that clear picture that I painted in my head of losing weight and being at goal, there were all sorts of negative noises, it's a very accurate word he uses, that would sometimes take me away from it. So external might be people saying, you don't look like you've got much to lose. What were they thinking? You know, I had 7.5 stone to lose, but people are kind, aren't they? And they don't want to be horrible to you. But I would take the, oh, she doesn't think I've got much to lose. Do I need to do this? And that, of course, I didn't want to diet. Of course, I wanted to eat conventional food, and I wanted to just carry on doing what I was doing. But that negative external noise would take me away from where I was going. So I had to deal with that, and I had to have. So what I did was I wrote down all that negative stuff that I heard and gave an answer to it, which is very much along the lines of CBT, I believe, where you come up with something that's causing a stumbling block and you write a response to it that's more helpful to you. So an internal example for me would be something like, I've had a really hard week this week, and I'm going to, after weigh-in, I'm going to treat myself to something no one needs to know. It's only going to be a little something. And yes, it might affect the scales ever so slightly, but no one else needs to know about that. But I really need to reward myself. So that was, of course, it would slow my weight loss down. And it was, again, taking me away from that direction I needed to go in. So I dealt with it by every time I thought a thought like that, I would jot it down. So having a diary of some sort and really using that to map out where you're going, to be very clear about your own reality, that you are overweight, that you do need to deal with it, that this is what your health risks are. Getting that all written down somewhere is a really, really powerful thing to do. Mapping out how you're then going to get to where you need to go, putting pictures and quotes and clear ideas of painting your target. And then every time that negative internal and external noise comes up that's taking you away from that target, deal with it. Write down a response, write down an answer. So although this might seem very negative, actually, you don't have to wait until you reach the point of desperation. You can actually create a reality where your goal is totally possible. Go for it.